Hello and welcome to Make It Happen with Will Polston. This is episode number 8 and this is Evolve Your Thinking Part 2. So if you're listening to this episode and you haven't listened to Part 1, I highly recommend you go back to Part 1 and listen to what we started talking about when we were talking about evolving your thinking, because then everything's going to make a little bit more sense. So hopefully you've already listened to Part 1 and we're going to get stuck straight into talking again about consciousness. So in the last episode I started talking about consciousness and the 7 levels of consciousness, but what I want to talk about in this episode is something known as the map of consciousness, which was developed by Dr. David Hawkins, and it's based on a logarithmic scale, which a logarithmic scale is what they used to measure earthquakes with. And what we're doing with this particular scale is measuring energy. Now, the reason we want to do this is because we vibrate. We're matter, and we're vibrating. And depending on what we're feeling is what's going to determine what our frequency is. So there's this map of consciousness which has a number of different levels to it. I mean, in total, we're probably looking at about 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. 17 different levels. And the lowest energies are shame and guilt. So shame being the lowest. And then the highest energy, so in terms of the frequency on the logarithmic scale, is enlightenment. Now, just to give you an idea, so shame is the associated emotional state with shame is humiliation, and the view of life is miserable. Guilt, which is the next level up, is associated emotional state is blame, and then the view of life is evil. Then you've got the other extreme, which is peace. So the associated emotional state is bliss, the view of life is perfect, and then you've got enlightenment, which the emotional state is unfathomable, and the view of life just is. Now, like I said, there's 17 different levels here, but I've just given you a couple of them. Now, the reason these are really important is we want to look at raising your vibration. And years ago, I'd be the first to admit that I thought the whole idea of raising your vibration, this whole raising your vibration thing, was sort of a bit out there, a bit woo-woo, a bit hippie shit, you know. And I'm a pretty pragmatic guy. I like to think I'm a bit of a logical thinker. But what's happened is I've delved deeper into personal development and gone through sort of what I call the surface layers of personal development, like just goal setting and limiting beliefs. And I get really more caught up in studying at a scientific level, the more that I've been able to see the importance of it. And the reason being is an emotion is just a label that we put on a feeling. And that feeling that we have is created from pictures that we see in our mind, and voices in our mind as well, or our subconscious mind. So these feelings that we create are vibrations, and your vibration has an ability to attract other things or people that are attracting that are vibrating at the same level as you. So, like I said a few minutes ago, we're all matter, right? All matter vibrates, and it's just vibrating at different frequencies. So it's a little bit like when you have a radio and you pick up what's being transmitted at the same wavelength as the transmitter. So you've got a receiver, they're transmitting it, you're receiving it. So if you want to attract more in your life, what we want to do is get you to vibrate at the frequency of what the thing is that that you want it to that you want to attract. So if you're vibrating lower, you'll attract more of what it is that you don't want. And like I said, the map of consciousness explains this really well. So the lowest forms of energy are guilt and shame. Now, one thing to bear in mind, if you've got consistent financial challenge in your life, it's highly likely that the root cause along the line is unresolved guilt or shame, because that is what impacts your deserve level. Your deserve level, if you have a low deserve level, it's because you've got guilt or shame that you're holding on to. So we want to eradicate that. Now, when you're vibrating at your highest, so the enlightenment level, is when you're in pure gratitude. Now, remember, gratitude is a frequency. It's unconditional love. Now, listen to the words I just used there. Unconditional love. There are no conditions to it. So there's no right or wrong or good or bad. It just is. Hence why the view of life is in Dr. David Hawkins' map of consciousness. So when it comes down to gratitude, it isn't just about seeing the good. It's about seeing the good in the bad and the bad in the good. So if we want to take that to the next level, what we've got to do is realize that there is no good or bad. It's all a matter of perspective. There is no right or wrong. There is no hot or cold. It is all perspective because they're on one spectrum. So I know personally this is something that I'm still constantly working on. It's something that I'm having to develop, and yeah, it's tough at times. But what gives us that lopsided perspective of where we see things in different ways is our own expectations, or when we perceive to want to see something in a different way. And as I explained in the previous episode, happiness is equal to or greater than your expectation. So if your expectation is always life just is, and you're living to your highest values, then you'll be able to be in a position where you can vibrate at your highest, and you'll truly be able to fulfill. So I hope that is useful. I do highly recommend checking out a book called Power versus Force by Dr. David Hawkins if you want to explore this in more detail. Now, some of these concepts that I'm talking about in terms of evolving your thinking, what I'm starting to bring in is some universal laws. Now, I'm going to do a whole nother episode on universal laws in much more detail. I'm actually working at the moment on creating a really comprehensive but simple way to explain universal laws, because from all of the work that I've done and the studying that I've seen, I've not come across anything yet that pulls it all together really well. So that's something I'm working on. I'm going to touch on it just for the moment. So the fact of the matter is, universal laws are laws that apply to all of us, right? They apply to all of us, and a lot of sort of the ancient, mystical, esoteric teachings dating back from thousands and thousands of years, like ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, ancient India, they understood the power of these laws of the universe, which again back then might have been deemed quite spiritual, but these days we just understand it much more at a scientific level. So there's a couple of distinctions that I need to make. So the first thing is that the types of laws. So you've got two types of laws. You've got civil laws, which is a man-made law, right? So we as human beings, we've created these laws, and the laws are set to influence people into doing or not doing certain things. And those laws are made by people that are in positions of power, like presidents and governments and ministers and all that stuff. So they're civil laws. A universal law, which have a few different names, like omnipresent or natural laws. These laws are unwritten. And although they can seem a bit woo-woo, they are actually all based on mathematics and proven scientific studies. And universal laws impact all events, all conditions, all circumstances, all experiences. All right. There's a great quote from one of the sort of Britannia books, which is, "To know the law of nature, we must learn to know nature, since its laws are rigid, and it's only our ideas about them that can be false." Which in essence is saying is that the laws are the laws, and if we don't live by the laws, then we're going to be impacted. So there's quite a number of different laws that are particularly impactful. But one of them, and I am going to do a full breakdown on this in much more detail, but the one that I'm going to touch on today is the law of one and many. Now, the law of one and many actually has lots of different names. It's known as lots of different things. It's known as the law of correspondence, the law of transmutation, the law of nothing is missing, the law of divine oneness. Now, for me, this is a really important law because so many of the other universal laws splinter off of this. It's the most universal of all the universal laws that we know of, and it basically states that from the one comes the many, and from the many comes the one. And the law implies that we're provided with everything we need in the exact form we need it. And the way that we filter through all the different forms is based on our reticular activating system, or our senses, basically. Well, the reticular activating system in our brain enables us to focus, but our senses is essentially what we're taking this information in from. And the law also supports the very well-known scientific theory that energy is never destroyed, it only changes form. So it's a really good base of understanding of when we want to change our thinking about certain situations. We need to understand that we need to align our thinking with the with that main law, and which comes back to the thing that I was talking about, perception, earlier in this episode and in the previous episode of the Wayne Dyer quote is, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it. So again, there's certain things that universally, due to the universal laws, we can't change them, but we can change the way you think about them. So by doing this and applying this and utilizing this and really using the power of gratitude, we can completely change how we live. We by practicing gratitude, we have the ability to live in a beautiful state, and there's so many benefits that come from it. I just want to share a personal story. So a couple of years ago, I was playing ice hockey, and during that ice hockey game, I took what we call a cross check to the face, which is basically a stick across the face, and I got hit pretty hard, went down onto the ice, face hit the ice, lip got stuck to the ice, nose was in pieces, blood everywhere, and I'd really badly broken my nose. So much so that sort of my nose was the bone of my nose was across my face, and my septum was across the other side of the face. So I went to hospital, and they were like, "Yep, your nose is broken." I was like, "Yeah, thanks. That's pretty obvious." So they tried to manipulate it. They couldn't do it. A few days later, I had to go in and have what they call a manipulation under anaesthetics. They knock you out, and then you have this operation. Anyway, in the lead up to that operation, the particular individual that did this to me, he really annoyed me. So much so that if I just think of his name, I'd get fueled with anger. So I decided I need to do something about it. So I decided to say, right, I need to write out 10 reasons why I'm grateful this happened to me. So I write out my 10 reasons I'm grateful. And I'm saying things like, I'm grateful for the fact that there was the NHS. I'm grateful for the fact that it only broke my nose. I'm grateful for the fact that I hadn't broke my nose before. All these reasons. I said that my 10 things I'm grateful for. And then I thought of him again. And I just still wanted to kill this guy, right? I wanted to go and get him. So then I decided to do 25. And then I'm finding more and more reasons to be grateful for it. And then I get to the point where I say his name, and I still want to go and kill this guy. And then eventually I ended up doing 150 reasons why I was grateful for this happening. And I was having to really dig deep, like saying things like I was grateful for that happened to me and not one of my teammates. I was grateful for the fact that I was self-employed and I was in a position where business was doing okay at that point, and it didn't impact me too much. I was grateful for the fact that it didn't matter that I had a broken nose and I could still work. There was loads of things that I was coming out with. But eventually, I got there, I said his name, and I was at peace. I didn't feel any anger or, I suppose, resentment towards the guy in any way whatsoever. Now, lo and behold, about 2 years later, I get a message from this guy on Facebook. And he said, "Will, I've been watching your videos." Now, I used to do a lot of videos, and when I start my videos, I say, "Hi, it's Will Polston, make it happen." And a lot of my mates take the piss, they'll be like, it's Will Polston, make it happen. And they take the piss about the fact that I used to start my videos like that when I'd catch up with him. I thought that he was going to say something along those lines. But he said, "Will, I've been watching your videos and I found them really useful. I think they're really good. And as a result, I've decided to take over a particular hockey team." And I said, "Wow, that's great. Thank you very much. I'm pleased that I could be able to sort of inspire you, and I've been able to make that difference." He said, "And not only that, I've been able to take over the whole sort of junior club and working with that as well." And I thought, wow, that's great. And it was only after he said that to me, it dawned on me that if I hadn't have done that gratitude exercise a couple of years previously, then I would have deleted him off social media. Because every time I saw his name, it would have triggered me and it would have made me angry. But because I did that exercise and I could get to peace with it, he was then able to see my videos. So indirectly, I've been able to, because of the work that I chose to do, I've been able to have an impact on lots and lots and lots of people that wouldn't have maybe been able to play hockey in that particular part of the country if that wasn't the case. So it has so many benefits. So that's just one personal example. Another great example of being able to use gratitude is being able to turn mistakes into magnificent learning opportunities. We've all made mistakes, right? A mistake is just defined as an act or a judgment that's misguided or wrong. But because what we know is that there's no right or wrong, everything's a matter of perspective, we can see this from a different perspective. Now, if you take the definition of a lesson is defined as a period of learning or teaching. So if we think about it, with the right perspective, a mistake is really just a lesson. So the way you turn a lesson into a learning opportunity is by finding what that learning is. What's the learning? And ensure that it stays a learning opportunity is by taking the actions that you don't make the mistake again. And that by that happening, it enables you to be grateful for your mistakes. And when people say to me, Will, what's your biggest regret? So many of these things from the past, I've already shifted to see how it served me. Because remember, life happens for you, not to you. That I don't deem mistakes something that I want to change. I'm so grateful for the mistakes that I've made. I've taken myself into that position that I can actually honestly say, hand on heart, if I could go back and do it again, I would. That's when you know you're at a state of gratitude. Because there's 3 levels. There's the pain level that you're in, where you're in resentment or whatever else it might be. Then you get to a level of indifference where it doesn't really... You could almost forget about it, but if you could change it, you would still. And then the 3rd level, which is the level we're really striving towards, is the level of gratitude. And you know you're in gratitude typically because you might get a tear of inspiration, or you feel a real shift emotionally. Or if you could go back and do that thing again, you would do it. The final thing that I want to go through in this episode, before we round up the Evolve Your Thinking module that we're covering as part of these podcasts, is transformational language. This is, for me, as someone that's trained in neurolinguistic programming, the power of language is so important, and the choice of words that you use has a significant impact on you and other people, and it's probably happening more than you're aware. So if we just take the word love as an example, right? Sanskrit, which is ancient Indian, they have 96 words for love. Ancient Persian has 80. Greek has 3. But in English we have 1. Now, I love my mum, but I also love Galaxy chocolate. But they're very different things. So don't you find it odd that one word can have so many meanings? Now, again, taking something else as a concept, Inuits, they have 30 words for snow. Because for Inuits, it can literally be a case of life or death. So they have to have the exact information about snow because they spend their life in it. Now, we only have 1 word for snow, but regardless of whether it's snow or anything else, the choice of language you use is vital to dealing with your emotions. Because remember, an emotion is just a label, i.e. a word, that we put on a feeling. And we experience a whole host of emotions, right? And that can happen in a whole day sometimes. So what I feel would be really useful is to have better ways of being able to deal with them. Now, there's actually 3,000 words to describe an emotion. But if I was to do an exercise with you and you was to write down your emotions and the emotions you feel most often, you'll probably find that you cap out at about 12. So what's my point here? Well, if you could imagine walking into your local park, right, and you could only see 12 colours. And what I mean by 12 colours is 12 shades of something. So all of the grass looks the same colour, all of the trees look the same colour, the water looks the same colour, the plants are the same colour. If you could only see 12 of them, it would be a pretty bland, boring image. And it's exactly the same with our emotions. So we have the ability to change what you might deem as negative emotions simply by changing the language you use. So I'm going to reel off some examples here. And by doing this, what you're doing is you're taking the edge off of the negative feelings. So you could change I'm angry to I'm a bit annoyed. I'm afraid to uncomfortable. I'm anxious to a little concerned. I'm pissed off to I'm peeved. I'm disgusted to surprised. Failed to learning, nervous to excited, frustrated to challenged, furious to passionate, hurt to bothered, I hate to I prefer, insulted to misinterpreted, irritated to stimulated, lonely to available, lost to searching, overloaded to stretched, overwhelmed to imbalanced, rejected to underappreciated, sad to sorting my thoughts, stressed to busy, terrible to different. Now, as you've been listening to some of those words, can you notice how it creates a shift and it takes the edge off just by literally changing those words? But we can also do the opposite, which is heightening positive emotions. So rather than saying strong, you could change strong to invincible, quick to explosive, good to great, okay to fantastic, nice to spectacular, love to adore, motivated to pumped, interested to captivated, glad to over the moon, fantastic to fabulous, energized to turbocharged, curious to fascinated, awake to raring to go, alright to superb, alert to energized, confident to unstoppable, excited to ecstatic, fortunate to blessed, good to magic, great to incredible, like to idolized. So one of my challenges to you to sort of round off this podcast is try for at least a week to notice every time you're about to say a negative emotion, to shift it to something that's let's say a shade lower, right? So I say a shade. Shade's good, obviously, if we're talking about colours, but on the dial, it's sort of a notch down to take the edge off for you, and notice the difference that it makes. Now, what's really interesting about this is if you don't want to feel an emotion anymore, if you delete that word from your vocabulary, you won't feel it. So choose your words very carefully. I hope you found this useful. If you have, again, please leave a 5-star review and a comment about what you think of this podcast in the reviews wherever you're watching it. Again, feel free to join the Make It Happen Facebook community, and also there's a quiz that you can now take, which is my happiness monitor quiz, so we can identify the areas that you are that are impacting you the most by giving you a detailed report on not only where you've scored lowest, but some practical ways of how you can change that, and the link to that is in the show notes. So see how you get on with that. Until next time, make it happen.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Make It Happen with Will Polston podcast. Make sure you join Will's free Facebook group, the Make It Happen community. Please support the show by subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, or Google Play. Share this episode with at least one friend you think would benefit from it, and give Will a 5-star review wherever you download your podcasts. Until next time, make it happen.